I do love it when she speaks to me that way. Right, so delegation. That's what we're thinking about this morning. Our passage today begins with what seems to me a deeply personal insight. Moses had been leading the Hebrews for some time. He had gone to Egypt. He'd confronted Pharaoh. He'd enabled the people to leave Egypt. He'd led them through the Red Sea. He'd led them around the wilderness. He'd begun this enormous task of leading an entire people. He'd begun the process of organising their corporate life. He'd seen the awesome power of God at work in the rescue of this people. And then he'd faced up to their grumbling, their moaning, their complaining when things weren't just right for them. But one of the things that we only realise at this point is that he had done all of this whilst being on his own. His wife and his two sons, well, he'd left them in the keeping of his father-in-law, Jethro. So this incredibly stressful time that he had been experiencing, he'd been experiencing without his closest family near to him. And I want to suggest that just in that insight, it gives us just a touch, a taste of the loneliness of leadership. Now, Jethro, his father-in-law, comes and brings his family to Moses whilst they're there in the wilderness. So Moses' wife, Zipporah, she's not actually named in this passage, but we know her name from elsewhere in the book of Exodus, and his two sons come along with Jethro, and they're now reunited with Moses. But this passage says little more about that. We don't get the sense that there's some incredible reunion between Moses and Zipporah and between Moses and the boys. What the passage majors on is Jethro, the father-in-law. Now, one of the things that we need to be clear on is that Jethro was not a Hebrew. He wasn't one of the people of God. But what we do know from elsewhere is that he came from Midian and that he was a priest. Now, we might think that as a Midianite, he followed Midianite gods. But what's clear from both his previous encounters with Moses and from what we hear of here is that Jethro honoured God. He honoured Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews. And when Moses told Jethro everything that God had done for the Hebrews in freeing them from slavery, this is what we're told. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. Jethro wants to give thanks and to celebrate for all that God has done for Moses and for the Israelites, the Hebrews. It's a timely reminder that we need to be thankful people for all that God has done for us. And it's even more striking that this comes from someone who was not part of the people himself, but someone who was interested in God and what God had to do. Somebody who was prepared to honour God even if he wasn't a fully committed believer. God is often at work in surprising ways, using people who might be regarded as outsiders, like Jethro. We need to look out for the Jethros who God sends to us. Jethro was to have a major influence, a major impact on the life of the people of God going forward from this point. So watch out for the Jethros. You see, there was a problem, and Moses hadn't spotted it. Aaron hadn't spotted it. Nobody within the people of God had spotted it, but Jethro did. This is what the text tells us. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood round him from morning till evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand round you from morning till evening?" The problem was that Moses was in effect a one-man show. Everything in terms of leadership of every kind depended on him. Nothing happened without Moses' say. His entire day was spent seeking God's will as it applied in every situation for every one of the Hebrew people. Morning till evening, he sat as judge, settling disputes, sorting out questions that people were asking. He was involved in every detail of community life. He had his finger in every pie, not just the odd pie. That's the problem. A leader involved in everything. Jethro thought that was a problem, and he pointed it out. Why? This is what he said. What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. You cannot handle it alone. It's right that there is a clear leader. And Moses was that man. There's no doubt about that. But it is not good to be a one-man band. Jethro knew that that was the case. And Jethro, coming from the outside, being Moses' father-in-law, was able to point that out. Moses was on the road to burnout if he carried on in this way. And if he burnt out, where would the people be without their key leader? What Moses was trying to do was too much for one person to carry. What was not obvious to Moses was obvious to someone looking in from the outside. Like Moses, sometimes we need the objectivity of someone looking in from the outside on what we're doing and giving us an honest assessment. And sometimes in church, we collude with the idea that everything can be, should be, has to be done by the vicar or the minister or the pastor, whatever you want to call him or her. It's a problem. And Jethro puts his finger on this whole wrong model of leadership, this Lone Ranger approach to leadership. Because Jethro knew that leadership, if it's going to be effective, has to be a corporate activity, a shared responsibility, and something best carried out alongside others. So here was the solution. This is the advice that Jethro offered. He laid out for Moses a way of working that was based on shared responsibility. Moses would no longer be responsible for every decision, every judgment, and for leadership at every level. In effect, Jethro offered Moses a new job description. And this is what it contained. It said, Moses was to represent God to the people and represent the people to God. He was to be a go-between. That was a key part of what he was to be doing. Secondly, Moses was to be the teacher for the people and a model for them to follow. And thirdly, Moses was to serve as the high court judge, the supreme court in the land. The difficult cases were to be brought to him, but he was not to oversee every minor matter. I wonder what Moses actually thought when Jethro said to him, Moses, you're only going to deal with the difficult cases. I wonder how Moses thought about that. Did he feel relief that he wasn't going to have to deal with every single case? You know, the people who are coming because they got a dispute over whether someone's sheep had eaten someone's best cloak. Was that really something that Moses wanted to be involved with? So maybe he felt a bit of relief being told, you're only going to deal with the difficult cases. Or maybe he thought, oh no, just the hard stuff for me to be responsible for passing judgment over. But the thing was that this new job description was a limited job description. It was no longer that Moses was going to be working from dawn to dusk, tackling everybody else's issues. And the way that could happen was this, because Jethro set it out for Moses. He said, select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them serve as judges for the people at all times, but let them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. Jethro put his finger on what was needed. Moses had to organize the people into different levels of groupings. Thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens. And at each level, there were to be leaders. And Moses was to delegate responsibility to these leaders at every level. He was to appoint these leaders, and he was to give them responsibility as judges at each level. The solution that Jethro outlined was for leadership to be shared out for different responsibilities for people at different levels. And those who held such responsibilities were to be people Moses could trust. They were to be people who had a real and vibrant relationship with God. Now, all of that is interesting or not, isn't it? Some of you might have switched off by now. What does it mean for us? Well, this model of delegation and shared responsibility outlined by Jethro is one which has been applicable for God's people throughout history, and it's equally applicable today. It is not just about the vicar doing everything. There should be no lone leadership. There should be shared responsibility. There should be delegation. And that is something that we need to take seriously as church. And every single member of the congregation, the membership here, needs to take that seriously, that leadership should be shared. As ministry in Rossendale changes in the coming months, as the 9 parishes that make up Rossendale become a team, this whole idea of delegation and shared leadership is going to become more important. It's important that all of us, not only here at St Anne's, but across the other churches as well, are willing to take on responsibility if they are called to that responsibility by God. And that's responsibility at whatever level within the life of the church. All of us need to be willing to step up to the plate. In the coming months, you might hear something talked about focal leadership. As we move into this team scenario, what every parish is being asked to have is somebody who is their local focal leader. That won't be me, because I'll have a wider role, a role, if you like, that in our situation in Rossendale mirrors Moses' role in those ancient times. So we've been preparing for this. That's why we created a leadership team here. And our leadership team has been already at work. And some of the things that we have been doing and are about to do are things that the leadership team have taken responsibility for. So in case you didn't know who the leadership team is, I'm going to mention their names again. It's Sue Hopkinson and Lindsay Hernan, who are looking at outreach, and in particular have been looking at Alpha and Alpha Plus. It's Peter and Chris, Peter Hayward and Chris Eco, who are looking at training and education. It's Claire Wise and Jill and Amanda Robertson, who are looking at things to do with children's work, and also Eco Church. And it's Trish Bernard and Angela Jones, who are looking at prayer. So please pray for them as we work together, as we share responsibility, as there is more delegation, as we work for the mission and ministry of God's church in this place. And if God is calling you to responsibility in some area, say yes and step up to the plate.